Jordan's current still clung to their boots when they stepped onto the west bank. 40 years of wandering in the desert were behind them. Pharaoh's army drowned behind them in the Red Sea. They had walked through fire and starvation and doubt, and they were here, at last. Some threw their hands up and cheered. Some knelt and pressed their foreheads to the dry dirt, crying for the friends and family who never got to see this day. But when they lifted their eyes, the celebration died. The land of Canaan stretched out before them, vast, fortified, and fierce. Crossing a river and conquering a nation are two very different things. Powerful tribes had held this ground for generations. Their warriors trained to fight from the day they could walk. Iron chariots waited with spiked wheels sharpened to cut through lines of infantry. Cities rose from the hills. Their walls stacked so high the top blocks blended into the hazy blue sky. This was not going to be easy. No one said it out loud at first, but every man and woman standing there felt it. The worst was not behind them. The worst was waiting ahead. Joshua climbed the highest ridge above the camp at dusk to map the only road that cuts into the heart of Canaan. He tracked the line of the pass with his eye, step by step, and found it blocked. Not by a mountain, not by a river, by Jericho. This was not just any border outpost. It was the key stronghold, the locked gate that no army could walk around. Any move inland would leave an undefeated Jericho behind them, cutting their supply lines and trapping them between two armies. Jericho was wealthy. It was wicked. It had grown proud on the tribute of caravans, devoted to the false goddess Ashtaroth that the Canaanites worshipped under the full moon. Darkness had settled into the city, deep, comfortable behind stone that had held against every invader for 100 years. Joshua stared down at the walls, and he did not sugarcoat the truth. This was the first battle. It would set the tone for everything that came after. Win, and the whole land would open up. The people would find their courage, and the Canaanite kings would lose their nerve before they ever drew their swords. Lose. And they would be trapped right here on the Jordan's banks. Their morale would shatter. The alliances that held the 12 tribes together would split apart. They would break before they even started. Joshua knew they could not win this fight alone. All the military training in the world could not crack those walls. Not with the tools they carried, not with the army they had. That night, he slipped away from the camp, left the chieftains arguing around the fire, left the scouts rechecking their maps. He walked up a low-rise behind the tents, alone, and the stars came out bright over the Jordan Valley. The air turned sharp with cold. The camp noise faded behind him, replaced by the rustle of dry brush and the distant cry of a jackal. He knelt in the dust and bowed his head. He did not beg for victory. He asked for direction, for a way through a problem no human mind could solve. When he looked up, the hair stood up on the back of his neck. A man stood towering over the brush at the edge of the rise, armed for battle, sword already drawn, the steel glinting silver in the moonlight. No sound of his approach, no warning. Joshua stepped forward immediately, hand closing around the hilt of his own sword. "Whose side are you on?" he asked. The warrior did not flinch. He did not raise his blade. "I am the captain of the Lord's host," he said. The words hit Joshua like a blow. He dropped his hand from his hilt. He hit the ground face down in the dust, his forehead pressing into the grit between the stones. This was no ordinary scout, no Canaanite assassin. This was the Son of God himself, standing on holy ground. Joshua did not move. He waited, and the captain gave him the battle plan. It was nothing like anything Joshua had ever expected. Nothing like any battle any army had ever fought. No siege towers, no battering rams, no scaling ladders propped against the walls before dawn, no clever flanking maneuvers to cut off the water supply, no feints to draw out the Canaanite soldiers. The captain discarded every tool and tactic any army had ever used to take a walled city. This battle would not be won by strength of arms or cleverness of mind. It would be won by obedience alone. "Here is what you will do," the captain said. "You will march. The entire army will circle the outer walls of Jericho, one full circuit every day for 6 days straight. The priests will go first, ahead of every rank, carrying the Ark of the Covenant between them. 7 priests will walk ahead of the Ark, blowing trumpets of ram's horn as they go. The entire army will walk in complete silence. No calls to the watchmen on the walls, no taunts, no battle cries, not a single word spoken between ranks, from the first step out of camp to the last step back. When you finish one full circuit, you will stop, you will turn, you will march straight back to your camp outside the city walls, you will set up your tents, you will rest, and you will do the same thing, the exact same thing, tomorrow and the next day. For 6 days, Joshua stayed face down in the dust, every word sinking in. This plan looked foolish. It looked useless. It looked like it would accomplish nothing but tire out his soldiers and make his entire nation a laughingstock to the men on the walls. But this was God's plan, not his. He did not argue, he did not question, he accepted the order, and he carried it back to the camp to prepare. Dawn broke on the first day. The Israelites formed up outside the walls, priests leading, ark carried steady at the front, trumpets sounding soft at measured intervals. The entire army stepped forward in lockstep, not a voice raised above the rustle of feet on dirt. The watchmen on Jericho's walls leaned on their spears and laughed. They pointed. They called down crude jokes about crazy desert wanderers who came to fight a city without drawing a single blade. The laughter rolled off the stone walls and out into the valley. The Israelites kept walking. They finished one full circuit. They turned. They marched straight back to camp. That night, around the fires inside Jericho, the story was told as a joke. An elder sat silent in the back of the hall, his knuckles white on his cup. He did not laugh. When the jokes died down, he spoke. He reminded them of Pharaoh's army, drowned in the Red Sea when the waters closed back over their heads. He reminded them of the kings of the Transjordan, broken one by one before this people even crossed the Jordan. He reminded them of the plagues, of the blood in the rivers, of the firstborn dead in every Egyptian home on that first Passover night. The room went quiet. No one laughed after that. Day 2. The gates stayed barred. The laughter got thinner. Guards doubled their posts along the wall. Day 3. Children snuck to the parapets to watch the procession, then were snatched back by their mothers before they could even lean over the stone. Day 4. No one laughed at all. No one made jokes. No one talked about the crazy wanderers. Food rations were cut, just in case the siege dragged on. Stores began to dwindle. Day 5. The silence inside the walls got thicker. Every watchman scanned the valley every time the trumpet sounded, waiting for something they could not name. Day 6. The Israelites marched their 6th circuit. They turned, they marched back to camp. Inside Jericho, no one slept easy. The tension coiled so tight in every street, every house, every guard post that you could cut it with a knife. The Israelite camp held its breath through the night. No loud songs around the campfires, no boasting about the coming victory, no plans for plunder. Every man lay in his tent, listening to the wind move through the brush, waiting for the call they knew would come. A young soldier shifted on his bed of dry grass, his feet still aching from 6 days of marching. He'd closed his eyes 3 times, but sleep would not come. He kept thinking about the walls, the silence, the way the Canaanites had stopped laughing after day 4. Then, the first blast of the trumpet cut through the pre-dawn dark, not the soft, measured blast of the daily march. A short, sharp call to arms. Men grabbed their shields and their spears, fumbling in the gray half-light. The order passed from sergeant to captain to the ranks. Today you do not march 1 circuit. Today you march 7. 7 full laps around the walls of Jericho. And no one speaks. Not one word until the command is given. The young soldier adjusted his grip on his spear, fell into line behind the man in front of him. The priests stepped out first, their shoulders set to carry the ark between them. The first lap unfolds in total silence. The priests lead, the ark swinging steady between them, their feet kicking up small puffs of dust that hang in the still morning air. The trumpeters walk ahead, horns still silent, their lips pressed tight against the mouthpieces. The army follows, every boot hitting the ground in the same rhythm. The watchmen on the walls do not laugh. They do not call out. They lean against a stone, eyes fixed on the procession below, and they wait. 1 lap done, they turn. The second lap begins. The sun creeps higher over the eastern hills, painting the stone walls pale gold. Heat starts to seep through the dirt, rising to soak through the soles of every marching man's sandals. 2 laps done. Turn. Third. The young soldier from the camp feels his calves burn. He does not cough. He does not clear his throat. He holds every sound locked in his chest, just as the order commands. 3, done, turn. Fourth, a veteran soldier in the front rank feels his grip on his spear start to slip. Sweat runs down his forehead, stings his eyes, drips off his chin onto the dirt. He does not lift a hand to wipe it away. He keeps walking. 4, done, turn. 5th, halfway there. Every man in the line can feel the moment approaching. No one says it. No one needs to. The air itself hums with it. Jericho's watchmen shift their weight. They reach for their swords, their hands unsteady on the hilts. 5, done. Turn. 6th, lap. Sweat beads on every forehead. Every throat goes dry from holding breath. Every heart hammers against rib cages so hard it feels like it might burst through the skin. The procession rounds the final corner of the 6th lap. The priests step across the starting line. They turn to set their feet for the 7th lap. The entire army holds its breath. The moment is here. The 7th lap begins. No one breaks the silence. Every foot falls steady, even as every muscle screams to run, to strike, to end the waiting. The priests move past the starting line, the arc glinting in the rising sun behind the 7 trumpeters. The trumpeters step forward, aligned perfectly at the front of the line. They reach the midpoint of the lap, the point closest to the main gate of Jericho. The lead trumpeter takes a deep breath. He lifts the horn to his lips. The other 6 follow. In perfect unison, they blow. The sound comes out not as a note, but as a shock. A long, deep, rolling blast that shakes the dust off the ground under every man's feet. It rolls up the face of the wall, bounces off the stone, echoes back down into the valley, then out across the hills. A watchman on the wall had knocked an arrow 10 minutes before. His hand had been steady, waiting for the order to shoot. When the trumpet hits, his fingers go limp. The arrow drops from his bow, clatters on the stone at his feet. He grabs for the parapet to keep from falling. His knees have turned to water. No one moves to stop him. Every other watchman is frozen too, their eyes wide, their ears ringing with the sound. The blast fades slow, rolling off into the distance. Before the last echo can die, Joshua lifts his voice. It booms across the plain, cuts through the lingering ring of the horns. Now, he shouts. The first cracks do not show on the face of the wall. They start deep in the foundation, where layers of stone have pressed against each other for 100 generations. The shockwave from the roar travels down through the dirt, hits the packed stone footings, and unsticks what time had locked tight. A Canaanite captain stands on the highest parapet, clutching the stone rail to steady himself against the shaking. He sees the top edge of the outer wall shift. Just a fraction. Just an inch forward, then back. He opens his mouth to scream a warning. His voice comes out cut off by the roar of the Israelites. But even if anyone had heard, there was nowhere to run. No time to gather children, no time to grab weapons, no time to understand what was happening. The first outer block pulls free from the mortar holding it. It drops straight down, hits the ground at the base of the wall, and shatters into a dozen pieces. One block goes, then 10, then 100. The entire length of the north wall shudders, tilts forward, and drops. The sound of it is louder than the shout, louder than the trumpets. It is a deep, grinding roar that drowns out every other noise, that shakes the hills for miles around. The inner wall follows the outer. It does not crack. It does not crumble piece by piece from the top down. Joshua lowers his arm. The roar dies slowly, fading into the rumble of shifting stones still settling in the dust. He steps forward first, boots crunching on loose broken blocks, leading the army toward the gap where the north gate had stood. The dust still stings their eyes, so they blink hard, squinting at the shadowed streets beyond the fallen perimeter. The Canaanite survivors who did not die under the collapsing walls have already fled deeper into the city, leaving their homes and their goods abandoned in the chaos. A young soldier in the front rank spots a silver cup half buried in dust near his feet. He bends, reaches out, fingers closing around the cool metal. Before he can lift it, a hand clamps down on his shoulder. He looks up. It's his sergeant, shaking his head sharp. He pulls his hand back, lets the cup fall back into the dust. The news spreads fast up and down the line, passed from rank to rank in sharp, quiet whispers. God has already spoken. This victory is not theirs to strip for profit. Everything inside Jericho belongs to God. Joshua stops at the edge of the first intact street, turns to face the whole assembled army, and makes the command explicit for every man to hear. Before any soldier crosses the threshold of the first house, you will remember this. Touch nothing that has been forbidden. Take nothing for your own. If you disobey, you bring trouble on the entire camp of Israel. Jericho was secured. The command had been given and heard. Joshua turned his attention north, to the next mark on the map. Ai, a small town, tucked into the rolling hills a few miles from the fallen fortress. Too small to pose any real threat on its own. But it sat on the road north into the heart of Canaan, so it had to be taken. Joshua picked 2 experienced men from the ranks, men who had scouted enemy territory before crossing the Jordan. He sent them out at dusk, when the light was thin enough to hide their movement. Go, he told them, scout the walls, count the warriors, tell me what we face. The camp settled in for 3 days of waiting, while the spies moved through the hills, staying out of sight, watching Ai from the high ridges. On the 3rd afternoon, a sentry posted on the northern edge of the camp spotted them coming down the slope. He lifted his head, squinting against the sun. They were not running, they were not crouching low to stay hidden. They walked slow, side by side, brushing dry grass off their legs as they came. Their shields were slung loose over their backs. Their faces held no tension. When they reached Joshua's tent, they ducked under the canvas flap, grinning. Joshua looked up from his map, waited for them to speak. "It is nothing," the first spy said. "We climbed the ridge above the town this morning, looked right down into their streets. The walls are low, they have less than 100 fighting men, all told. We do not need the whole army. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men, that is more than enough. They will not stand. It will be over before sunset, and we will be back here by dark. They do not have the strength to stop us. It is an easy win," the first spy repeated. "Nothing to worry about." Joshua folded the map closed and nodded. The victory at Jericho had been total, absolute, beyond any human expectation. The men were riding high, their feet still light from walking over fallen walls that had stood for a century. No one in the camp doubted they could take any Canaanite stronghold, no matter how well defended. So Joshua did what no one expected. He did not go to the tabernacle. He did not spread out the map before the ark. He did not bow his head and pray for direction, not like he had before crossing the Jordan, not like he had before the march around Jericho. He trusted the spies. He trusted their eyes. He trusted the easy confidence in their voices. He pulled 3,000 men from the ranks, told them to pack their gear and move out at first light. The 3,000 marched up the hill toward Ai, laughing as they went, their spears swinging loose at their sides. They traded jokes about the Canaanites running at the first sight of their banners. They planned what small souvenirs they would bring back for their families. They expected to set up camp by the town gates by midday and be marching home before the sun dipped below the hills. When they reached the open slope below Ai's walls, they stopped to form their line. They expected the Canaanites to cower behind the stone, but the gates of Ai flew open. Ai's warriors poured out, faster and bolder than anyone had predicted. They charged down the slope, yelling war cries, their blades glinting in the sun. The news spread through the camp before the last stragglers crossed the perimeter. The laughter that had echoed through the cook fires the night before died. The tents went quiet. Men who had walked out of Egypt, who had crossed the Red Sea on dry ground, who had watched Jericho's walls fall flat, stood staring at the bleeding survivors and said nothing. If Ai could do this, what would the great walled cities do next? What would the Canaanite kings with their iron chariots do when they heard the news? They would gather every warrior in the land, march down to the Jordan, and wipe the Israelites out before they could dig in. 36 men dead, for a town no one had even considered a threat. The weight of it settled over the camp like a shroud. Elders gathered outside Joshua's tent, their hands clenched at their sides, no one daring to speak first. Joshua stood at the edge of the camp gate, watching the last of his men stumble in. He saw the discarded shields abandoned on the trail. He smelled the blood on their tunics. He felt the hope that had burned so bright after Jericho guttered out in his chest. He grabbed the edge of his robes and ripped them down the front, from collar to hem. He bent, scooped a handful of dry dirt from the ground, and poured it over his head. The dust clung to his hair, settled on his shoulders, coated his hands. The tabernacle hung still after Joshua's cry. The only sound was the rasp of his breathing, the faint rustle of the veil moving in the night wind. Joshua waited, his forehead pressed hard into the packed dirt, his shoulders shaking with the force of his grief. He expected silence. He expected rebuke for his doubt. He expected a promise to fix what had gone wrong, to tell him how to regroup and fight again. He did not expect what came next. A voice cut through the quiet, clear and firm, no softness to soften the blow. "Get up," God said. "Why are you lying here on your face?" The question pulled Joshua up short. This was not the answer he had prepared for. "The problem was not Ai's strength," the voice continued. "The problem is not that my arm is too short to save. There is sin in the camp of Israel. Someone has broken my command. Someone took what I declared forbidden, the plunder from Jericho that I set apart for myself. They took it. They hid it. They have kept it secret among their own things. And because of this sin, Israel has lost the battle. Because of this hidden disobedience, I will not go out with your armies. I will not fight for you. Not until you root this sin out. Not until you deal with it openly before all the people. Not until you remove what has come between me and this nation." Dawn broke pink over the camp, and Joshua did not delay. He called every tribe of Israel to gather before the tabernacle. The entire nation pressed close together, no one speaking, every eye fixed on the spot where the lot would be cast. The process moved slow, deliberate, designed to give the guilty man every chance to step forward, to confess, to make it right before the whole nation. First, the tribes. The lot passed over Reuben, over Simeon, over Levi. It settled on Judah. A hush dropped over the crowd. The families of Judah stepped forward. One by one, the lot moved through them. It passed over every family line until it stopped at the household of Carmi. Joshua's jaw tightened. He called the men of Carmi forward, one by one, to stand before the Lord. Still, no one stepped out. No one raised a hand. No one spoke a word of confession. The guilty man stood silent, hoping the lot would pass him by, hoping his secret would stay buried under the dirt of his tent. The lot moved slow. It passed over every man in the household, and then it fell on Achan, son of Carmi, of the tribe of Judah. The crowd pulled back, a soft ripple moving through the press of bodies. Joshua stepped toward him, his voice heavy, steady, no anger yet, just a weight that pressed down on every chest. "Tell me what you did," he said. "Do not hide it from the Lord. Tell the truth." Achan did not deny it. His shoulders slumped. He looked at the ground. He confessed every word. "I saw the robe from Babylon. I saw 200 pieces of silver. I saw a bar of gold. I wanted them more than I wanted to obey. I took them. I wrapped them in leather. I buried them under the dirt of my tent floor." The words hung in the morning air. No one moved. No one breathed. The secret that had cost 36 men their lives was out. No one moved. No one spoke. The morning breeze stirred the hair on every head, but no one shifted their feet. Joshua nodded to the guards at his side. They turned and broke into a run, heading straight for Achan's tent at the edge of the Judahite camp. The canvas flapped open. They dropped to their knees, drove their hands into the packed dirt floor, and started digging. Dirt flew out behind them, clods hitting the canvas walls, dust rising into the morning light. 6 inches down, a foot. The tip of a shovel hit leather. They pulled it up. The bundle came out of the dirt, wrapped tight, still intact. They cut the leather open. There it was. The Babylonian robe, still clean, still folded. 200 glinting silver pieces. The heavy gold bar, warm from the earth. Every single thing Achan had described. No mistake, no lie. The stolen goods that had broken the nation standing before God, right there in the dirt for all to see. They brought Achan out bound and led him up to the wide open valley of Achor, between Jericho and Ai, the entire nation following behind in a long, silent line. The valley stretched out empty, sun already beating down on the dry grass. Achan stood in the center of the valley before all Israel, and there judgment fell. When it was done, the people piled great stones over the place, one on top of another, until a cairn rose high enough to be seen for miles. It was not a monument to victory. It was not a tomb for a hero. It was a warning. They named the valley Achor, which means trouble, because one man's secret sin had become an entire nation's crisis. This story does not let us walk away with easy answers. It starts with a miracle, and it forces us to ask, how did that miracle happen? The walls of Jericho were the strongest fortress in all Canaan. Generations of warriors had failed to break them. They had withstood every battering ram. They had outlasted every siege. Canaanite generals laughed at any army that tried to take them by force. But Israel did not bring force. They brought obedience. The walls did not fall to iron weapons. They did not fall to clever strategy. They did not fall to a larger army or a better trained soldiery. They fell to radical, counterintuitive obedience to a command that looked like foolishness to every eye on both sides of the wall. Think about what that command asked. No attack, no arrows, no ladders, just march. Once a day, for 6 days, in total silence, around the walls. Then go back to camp. Repeat. To any trained Canaanite soldier, that looked insane. To many of Israel's own men, it must have felt insane too. That is what true faith looks like from the outside. It does not look like a master plan the world can understand. It looks slow. It looks repetitive. It looks unexplainable. It asks you to do things that don't make sense to everyone around you. But when you obey, even when it looks foolish, the walls fall. That is the first lesson this story carves into stone, right there beside the valley of trouble. The second lesson is even harder and even more necessary. It is carved into that pile of stones in the valley of Achan, just as clearly as the first lesson is carved into the flat ground where Jericho's walls once stood. It starts with covetousness, the quiet, invisible sin that no one sees, that whispers in the dark when no one else is around. It does not roar. It does not announce itself. It just asks, just this one thing. You've earned it. No one will know. It's such a small thing. Look at what Achan took. A single robe, a handful of silver coins, 1 bar of gold. That's it. You could fit all of it under the dirt floor of one tent. You could wrap it up in a single piece of leather. To Achan, it looked small. It looked harmless. It looked like no one would ever get hurt. But that small hidden sin did not stay hidden, and it did not stay small. It leaked out of his tent. It poisoned the whole camp. It cost 36 good, innocent men their lives on the hills outside Ai. It shattered the nation's confidence. It broke the presence of God from the army. It put every single Israelite at risk of destruction at the hands of their enemies. What was a secret for one man became a crisis for everyone. This story refuses to let us pretend that sin is private, that what we do in the dark, that what we hide under our own floors hurts no one but ourselves. It is not true. Sin spreads, small sin grows, and what we hide in secret will not stay hidden, not forever. God sees it. The lot will fall. The dirt will give up what it buried. No secret stays buried when the Lord comes to reckon. That pile of stones in the valley of Achan does not just stand as a monument to judgment, it stands as a warning for every generation that comes after. Think about what Achan did. He wanted those things. He hid them under the dirt of his own tent floor. He thought he had buried them safe, out of sight, out of mind. He thought he could keep his secret and keep his sin and keep walking forward with the rest of the people, and no one would ever know. But the dirt that holds your secret is the same dirt that will hold you. The grave you dig for the things you want to hide, that is the same grave you dig for yourself. You think you are burying the truth. You think you are hiding from the consequences. But every shovelful of dirt you throw over your hidden sin is another shovelful you throw over your own future. This is the final, unflinching truth this story gives us. The things you bury under your own tent floor will always end up being the things that bury you. That stone pile still stands. The warning still holds.